Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. The podcast, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. That includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. Over the weekend, there was a massive disruption to flights in Europe as software made by Collins Aerospace called Muse, which stands for Multi-User System Environment, and is used for check-in and flight boarding processes, was hit by a ransomware attack, and as it turns out, several airports rely on this software. This disruption impacted services at major airports including London Heathrow, Brussels, and Berlin. Early on during the weekend, Dublin Airport suggested it was not impacted, but they have since clarified and said that the attack has indeed been disrupting some flights. And the same seems to apply for Cork Airport, as it is under the management of the Dublin Airport Authority. Although I find it a little confusing because I would think the check-in software, maybe some of the boarding software, if it's used by like gate agents, might be universal to the airport. But I would think that check-in software would be more airline specific. And I did indeed see that in Dublin Terminal 1, flights have not been disrupted and it's just kind of business as usual. And it's only affecting Terminal 2. And I saw some comments suggesting that it might be specific to Aer Lingus, who do operate mainly out of Terminal 2 for Dublin flights. So every article I've been seeing has been specifying just these certain airports, but I wonder if it impacts certain airlines more so than the airports themselves. And for context, over the weekend it was reported that Brussels Airport had asked airlines to cancel about half of the flights on Sunday and Monday. Check-in has unfortunately become a much more manual process because of the disruption. Thus, they could no longer handle all of the passengers that come through the airport on a given day. And that may also be maybe part of the reason why it's affecting Terminal 2 in Dublin versus Terminal 1. Maybe if the foot traffic and just the passenger load is greater in Terminal 2, maybe it's more disproportionately affected and it's not airline specific, but honestly, I'm a bit confused. I feel like it should be more airline specific. At the time of recording this episode, which is Wednesday the 24th of September, bleepingcomputer.com reported that the UK's National Crime Agency has arrested a suspect linked to the ransomware attack. And while someone has been arrested, it appears there is no relief yet in sight for the traveling public going through the affected airports, and rather worryingly, the chief of Dublin Airport suggested there is no timeline for a fix. This comes at the same time that Jaguar also recently announced a breach of their own, and they just announced that their operations will be impacted for at least another week. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the impact to operations by ransomware attacks. We saw this with Marks & Spencer, who couldn't process payments for several days and had to completely shut down online orders for months. And unfortunately, these types of attacks just seem to be on the rise, so there seems to be no rest for the wicked. Thanks to Austin Wall for sharing this next story with me, shortly before I got last week's episode, in fact. I just didn't go back and edit last week's episode to include it. But a security researcher named Dirk-Jan Mollema discovered a token validation flaw that gave him global admin privileges in every Entra ID tenant. Pretty wild. Potentially every Entra ID tenant is the way that I read this, but beside the point, right? He discovered that for certain products and services in Azure, they leverage actor tokens, which essentially have acted as another user for authenticating. But he discovered that actor tokens are not signed, meaning they can be used to impersonate any user in the tenant and give a 24-hour validity window without the possibility of being revoked during that period. He also stated that there was no proper logging to trace this occurring, or at least not most of the process of exploiting this flaw. And from an attacker's perspective, exploiting the flaw would have been possible in just a few steps, starting with generating the actor token from a tenant under their control. And they find the tenant ID for the targeted environment. They find a valid net ID of a regular user in the target tenant. They craft an impersonation token with the actor token from the attacker tenant using the tenant ID and net ID of the user in the victim tenant. They can list all global admins in the tenant and their net IDs, craft an impersonation token for the global admin, and then perform any read-write action through the Azure AD Graph API. Performing the read-write action through that Azure AD Graph API is the only action that appeared to get logged. So otherwise, those steps leading up to that do not get logged, so it might be difficult to detect. It reads like part of the security hole in Entra was addressed in July by Microsoft, and another flaw was patched earlier this month that was being leveraged, and that was CVE-2025-55241. And this one was a critical privilege escalation vulnerability in Azure Entra that got a whopping 10 out of 10 on the severity scale. Also, Azure AD Graph, which was used for the read-write actions, should no longer be able to be used for the APIs, as Microsoft had already planned and went through with retiring the Azure AD Graph API. So it sounds like we should be safe from this one. Pretty major flaw, though. I guess with great power comes great responsibility. When pretty much everyone is forced to use Azure Entra or Active Directory, and then going to Azure Entra more likely, Microsoft has a huge responsibility to protect those identities and just protect those tenants. Interestingly, Steam has announced that they will drop support for 32-bit versions of Windows starting of January next year. It is not surprising in itself, but it was surprising to me that they are picking January 2026. I would think that they would just drop it from October 14th when Windows 10 goes end of life, since that's the last Windows desktop OS with a 32-bit version. But I guess this at least indicates that they have no intention of supporting 32-bit through the 3-year extended security update phase that some customers may choose to use, but I don't know if it'll be that popular on the consumer side. Microsoft has reportedly removed a compatibility hold that prevented devices with integrated cameras from installing Windows 11 24H2 due to a face detection bug causing app freezes. The issues were triggered when using the Camera app, Windows Hello with facial recognition sign-in options, and other apps that utilize the integrated cameras on affected PCs. So it didn't affect necessarily all PCs that have integrated cameras, obviously, just certain models. But to get to the latest patch level, you should be all set now. So if you had noticed you were not able to get to 24H2 already, you should be able to if that was affecting you. And I'll share a link to the bleepycomputer.com report on this one if you want to see if this is something that does affect you. And you can find that with this episode at 5bytespodcast.com under episode 406. CybersecurityNews.com reported that Microsoft, SentinelOne, and Palo Alto Networks have announced that they will not participate in the 2026 MITRE attack evaluations. The coordinated withdrawal marks a significant shift in how leading security companies approach independent product validation, with all three citing a strategic reallocation of resources toward internal innovation and customer-focused initiatives. On Microsoft's part, Microsoft announced that after extensive deliberation, they decided to forego this year's evaluation to focus their resources on the Secure Future Initiative and on delivering product innovation to their customers. I'm sure all three withdrawing at the same time is not a coincidence. They didn't all just happen to have this idea to maybe pivot and invest some money or effort that they put into this every year into some of their own internal workings. I hope at least that MITRE continues to be a source of information for everyone, kind of that not single source of truth, but a main primary source of truth for vulnerabilities going forward. This is just the attack valuations. So unfortunately, I'm guessing we're probably going to lose some independent data and reports through this pullout from these three companies. But hopefully, I don't know, with others who contribute, there should still be decent enough sample sizes to make the data and the reports meaningful. BleepingComputer.com has reported that Cloudflare has mitigated a distributed denial of service attack that peaked at a record-breaking 22.2 terabits per second and 10.6 billion packets per second. This is a record that unfortunately seems to get broken quite frequently nowadays. In fact, I think this is not the first time it's been broken this year. So just another sign that the security landscape is just getting worse, unfortunately. BleepingComputer.com shared an article on a new freeze tool that could be used to freeze Windows Defender by leveraging Windows Error Reporting System flaws. The method described is by using a race condition attack. BleepingComputer.com has reached out to Microsoft for a comment on how to defend against such a technique being used, but they have not heard back yet as of, Wednesday the 24th of September. It'd be interesting to see if they do respond, because obviously having a tool out there capable of doing this does make it a bit easier for cyber gangs or bad actors to leverage this and maybe exploit the vulnerability. Microsoft has announced that Windows 365 Cloud apps are now available to all customers in public preview. Cloud apps reportedly allow administrators to give users access to specific apps delivered from the cloud instead of a full cloud PC. This is ideal for organizations that want to streamline app delivery, reduce overhead, and modernize their virtual desktop infrastructure environments. Windows 365 Cloud apps run on Windows 365 Frontline Cloud PCs in shared mode. The Windows 365 Frontline licensing model enables shared cloud PC access for shift-based or part-time workers, allowing unlimited users per license with one active session at a time. Since cloud apps stream only essential applications like Outlook or Word without loading a full desktop, it is ideal for task-based roles. Together, Frontline and Cloud apps will reportedly deliver a flexible, resource-optimized solution for dynamic workforces, especially in frontline environments like retail, healthcare, and government. Microsoft state that currently, customers must create custom images to deliver custom line of business apps as Cloud apps. And while this works, private preview participants complained that this process was outdated, so they are working to make Intune the single pane of glass for app deployment, enabling them to publish Intune apps as Cloud apps. Customers are already using Intune Autopilot in place of custom images, they say, so they similarly will support Intune's approach to modern app delivery for Windows 365 Cloud apps. I'm surprised, I guess, first off, that customers are using Autopilot for provisioning Windows 365 Cloud PCs. But I don't know. I guess like Windows 365 was being pitched as like, oh, well, this is like an easy way to get virtual desktops in the cloud versus something like AVD or traditional VDI. And the way they kind of pitched it was, well, your regular desktop administrators can even do it. You don't need to have experts in more complex workloads like VDI. But the custom image management for Windows 365 Cloud PCs is pretty straightforward. It's a very easy process. So I guess if customers think it's difficult, then they are going to make this change and have it done through Intune. It's also, without having tried this for myself, it's difficult to ascertain, this is for Frontline, which is those shared Windows 365 Cloud PCs, and these are Cloud apps, presumably hosted on these Frontline Cloud PCs, but then they don't have to launch into the Cloud PC to leverage some of these applications that are published. So it kind of sounds like it's old published applications, similar to Remote App or Citrix virtual apps or what have you. But maybe it's launching those sessions on a Frontline subscribed or Frontline subscription of a Windows 365 Cloud PC that's shared by multiple employees, which also sounds like a pretty expensive, clunky approach to published applications, just in my opinion. It'll also be interesting to see how they handle data roaming as well. traditionally, well, not traditionally because it's not traditional, but Windows 365 cloud PCs. I don't believe they have a direct integration or support for FSLogix or something like that. So if you do have to just destroy a cloud PC, it's like any persistent desktop. If that data was just persisting on the desktop and you blow it away, that data is gone. So it'd be interesting to see how that's managed in the context of these kind of shared published applications too. Microsoft also recently announced Windows 365 frontline support for government, community cloud, and GCC high customers. So I guess if you have government customers that you support, Windows 365 frontline is now an option. I also saw some Windows 365 capabilities in Copilot for Intune announced as well recently, amongst other things. So Microsoft seems to be in kind of ramp up mode, most likely getting some features into advanced preview stages with a hope to launch them into general availability at Ignite. So expect me to talk about some of these features again in a few weeks or a couple of months. So I think Ignite is like the third week of November. So you'll be hearing about this again on the podcast, I'm sure. Finally, in the news for this week, OpenAI and Nvidia have struck one of the biggest partnerships in AI, with Nvidia pledging to invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI while supplying the compute power needed to build the company's next generation of models, according to CNET.com. The deal announced just this Monday in a letter of intent calls for OpenAI to deploy at least 10 gigawatts of NVIDIA systems for AI data centers over the coming years. The first phase, 1 gigawatt, is scheduled for the second half of next year on NVIDIA's upcoming Vera Rubin platform. NVIDIA's investment will grow in scale as each new system is deployed. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said in a statement, quote, "This is the biggest AI infrastructure project in history," end quote. For NVIDIA, the deal makes it more than just a supplier. By gradually taking a large stake in OpenAI, it positions itself at the center of the AI boom, buying into the biggest AI company. And not a surprise because, NVIDIA and generative AI kind of go hand in hand. And yeah, I'm sure this is going to be in their best interests going forward. But now this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. Keep it short this week again, but I saw that the awesome Chris Twice at ControlUp published an article on the ControlUp disk monitor, which allows you to track file writes to FSLogix and Citrix UPM profiles, with the latter becoming much more relevant in the last couple of years too. It seems like there's a bit of a movement from FSLogix to the Citrix alternative. But like even if you're not a ControlUp customer, I found the blog post pretty insightful and interesting because regardless of what you use, if you are using these types of profile management solutions, there's good information in here to be gleaned. But that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening.